Okay, great. We're looking at another porch in Chicago here. And what's important about porch safety is that the porch be supported properly. So if you look here, you will notice that there are two boards. This is called a header. There are two boards together. It's also referred to in specific instances as a rim joist or a band joist. And these are the floor joists that tie into this rim or band joist. So notice how the band joist or header is doubled and that the floor joists are single, and they're usually 16 inches apart. So if you live in the city and you want to know about porch safety, think about these floor joists as sort of like your own ribs on the side of your body. These floor joists support the skin or the deck up above. If there's not enough of them, or if they're not properly headered, then the porch becomes unsafe by definition within the city of Chicago. There's another issue here, and that is where these headers tie into the post, it is no longer acceptable to just notch the post, in a way that they did it here. That's not okay. What's supposed to be in place here is that we need to have a steel L bracket, 6 inches on one side, 4 inches on the other, and it has to be thoroughly bolted through the upright or 6x6 and bolted into the header. This is a problem. So actually there are two problems that I want to show you. One of them is that the post has been notched, which is not okay, and the second is that we're missing an L bracket to help hold the post and the header together. Now this is very common throughout the city of Chicago. An additional deficiency on this porch is over here. In this area. So if you can note that the floor joists come back and tie into something called a ledger board. The ledger boards in the city of Chicago are required to have multiple bolts that tie into the masonry wall, and in some cases, depending on how many people are here and how many apartments there are, the outside beam is required to go into the masonry where it is embedded within a steel anchoring system. So in that way, if the porch catches on fire, if there are too many people on the porch will not pull away from the building and collapse, as it has done numerous times over the last 10 years in the city of Chicago. It creates tremendous, many people have been killed because of that deficiency. Look for bolts on your porch at the porch ledger, here and here, and all along this ledger board. The gap between the two floor joists is called a beam pocket. This beam pocket should have multiple bolts. At least two, in some cases they require 3 or 4 or more. So this would be considered hazardous, significantly deficient, or unsafe according to Illinois home inspection licensing standards. It needs repair immediately. Now, I would also point out that during a home sale or the purchase of a multi-unit building, my experience after many thousands of these inspections is that my clients don't worry about this quite as much as you would think. So yes, it's a material deficiency, but if we run up and down the porch and it seems solid, I tell them to fix it immediately, and I find years later that they don't make the necessary repairs because they understand that the city is not out as a SWAT team to try and make everybody's porch deficient throughout the city. The city oftentimes really can help you resolve these problems.
If you're buying into a multi-unit building that has a condo association, and we're talking about decks that go all the way up the back of a building, whose responsibility does that become to make those repairs prior to that sale?
A rear porch is generally considered it is considered a common element. And a common element means that all of the unit owners will own the rear porch together. So if you want something like this fixed, you have to convince the condominium board to take responsibility for this and not just the unit owner. However, as a building inspector and licensed home inspector, it doesn't make any difference to me who owns the property. If it's an unsafe condition, it's unsafe. Trying to figure out who owns it and somehow use that to mitigate the deficiencies is ridiculous. If you injure yourself climbing these stairs, and note that the same bolts I'm calling for here are missing on the stair stringer and at the top of the stair stringer, if you injure yourself on these stairs, then the condominium association would be responsible for the lawsuit if there is one, and they should be aware and should start to make multiple repairs where porches are deficient. With a proper understanding, they could spend $400 or $500 a year or $1,000 a year, and over 5 years, this porch would be in great shape. You know, look at this one. You can almost see on tape how nasty. Also, let's take a look at this porch. Here's another porch. It's an example of one that's been repaired within the city of Chicago. Notice up here that this connection between the upright and the last joist includes a notch into the upright, and that's not okay. If this split that I'm touching goes all the way through the board or the upright, then that's not acceptable within the city of Chicago. This joint is required to be bolted together between this board and the post. That's not done, and there are large gaps and splits. If those splits run through, then that's not acceptable. So even though this porch has had significant repair recently, it doesn't meet a minimum standard, and it would be considered hazardous, significantly deficient, and unsafe. Get these things fixed, Chicagoland. It's time that we start taking interest and awareness in what's wrong with our buildings.